So we will begin now with informational item C1, our strategic plan, and begin with item 1A, strategic plan quarterly report. Dr. Davis?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to invite Ms. Morse to the podium to provide informational item C1A, our quarterly report. Ms. Morse.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Madam Superintendent. I am pleased today to be able to bring you the second quarterly report on the progress that's been made as we implement our 5-year community-inspired strategic plan. I'd like to walk you through some of the highlights that you'll find in the report, but the full report has been provided for you and will be posted for our community onto our website no later than tomorrow morning. And of course, this report outlines the progress that's been made on each one of the 5 strategic actions in our plan. To orient you to the report and sort of as a reminder from the first time that Carl shared this with you back in October, each action has a series of icons that's shown here in the yellow box, representing those phases of work that all of the initiatives of the strategic plan are in, whether they are research, design, invest, implement, and our favorite one, of course, completed. And then within each phase for each action, there's a meter that shows the percent of tactics that fall into each. So, of course, the goal is ultimately that our little meter is going to have all of them at the completed phase by the completion of this 5-year time. And, of course, in addition, we're going to be able to look at highlights for each action that kind of provide you a glimpse into the type of work that's happening in each one of these areas. So let's quickly take a minute to look at the 5 actions so that we can get a glimpse at what the progress is that's being made and a little bit of an idea of what the work looks like as we're building the future for our district and, of course, for our Henry County community. Okay, so near and dear to my heart, of course, is Strategic Action 1, and of course, this is the part of the plan that really outlines the future for access to learning opportunities and then that opportunity to learn more in a Henry County classroom than you can learn anywhere else. And while this, much of this action is really still in the research and design phase, we're excited to share tonight, and of course in a business portion of this very meeting, that we are recommending that we acquire reading and writing resources that are called for in our strategic plan, as well as the robotics for grades 3-5, which of course are over there on display, to really begin building the systems for all students to be able to have STEM experiences and access STEM learning so that we're ready to open that STEM high school in 2026. Also, an item on tonight's business meeting agenda. Now, additionally, all of our 8th graders did take the PSAT this fall, so this is ensuring that all 8th graders have this opportunity so that we can look at them to determine systematically students who really we want to identify for advanced coursework in high school so that we don't miss anybody, making sure that we give kids those opportunities. And then, of course, also included in this quarter was much professional development happening around reading, writing, preparation for adding that orchestra program at all of our middle schools, and then as soon as March, bringing together all of our community early care providers to be able to ensure that that preschool experience is leading to success for our students in Henry. Okay, Strategic Action 2. This one is going to be about advancing effective leadership and classroom instruction to really ensure that all that we've planned to implement in Strategic Action 1 is done so in a really smart and well-executed way. Still primarily in the research and design phase here, which is to be expected, but a few of the highlights include the work that we're doing here to design the leadership matrix, to articulate those attributes of effective leaders in Henry County, sharing those attributes and sharing that matrix with our principals, and really using that to drive the coaching that we're doing with our principals every day to ensure that that continuous improvement and development is happening. We also have the development of a parent engagement steering committee to maximize parent and family partnerships and really to ensure that the voices of parents and guardians are always at the forefront of the decisions that we're making for our community. This board's core value of connectivity remains a priority, and the work of expanding on that lives here in Strategic Action number 3, ensuring that the community's plan involves that same community that drove us to design the system the way that we did. In the research and design phase is our Henry County Public Schools Foundation, that arm into our community that's going to be able to support scholarships and special programming that our community wants to see for our students. A real focus in this quarter for Strategic Action 3 has been designing supports for non-English speaking families, as well as creating better resources for our social workers so that they can help connect families to better resources to support them as well. And then, of course, the opening of our Welcome Center has been an incredible moment for our community to make accessing these supports all in one place that's easy and warm and welcoming and leading us to the initiative that falls under. Strategic Action 4 is all about student and employee health and wellness systems and support structures. You can see that is well underway in the research phase and beyond. Student wellness has certainly been a priority of this board, and of course you're very familiar with our mental health and wellness facilitators who are building toolkits to be able to use in every school. They're analyzing those wellness check-ins to formatively monitor student well-being and the perceptions that our students have about their experience and adjusting accordingly with their school administration. And newly drafted regulations were shared just last month with Dr. Davis and Mr. Schrum to provide those success plans for every student that's returning back to their home school after they've had an alternate setting. So, we even have teams, and I love this one, researching how movement and play need to be incorporated into the school day to ensure that students are ready to learn and able to learn when they've had that just right opportunity to move and be active prior to their learning. I'm excited about that one. And lastly, Action 5 is all about the efficiency of our operations as a district and the culture that we create to set high expectations for performance across every system that we manage. The data team, which lives here, is fully staffed now, almost fully staffed, and working cross-divisionally to really build the systems that allow us to more effectively monitor data and progress. And in fact, this very report was created as a result of the new data team creating a system that allows tactic owners to articulate when they have completed or what phase they're in of their research. So this is an example of what can happen with a smart data team building data systems. In addition, the RFP for the new ERP system is in design, as well as the plan for elementary school growth and replacement, as well as the upgrades for energy management systems that are going to be implemented this spring. Now, in addition to the progress monitoring of each strategic action that we just looked at, you can see here that the management of the strategic plan, in that regard, we've also made a lot of progress on bringing back the strategic plan to the community who inspired it. So, of course, you've been deeply involved with that, with our school council and our community meetings, and I'm excited because we are going to continue to bring this plan back to our community, and we're developing a more frequent system to solicit feedback from our advisories so that we can make sure that we are staying in the realm of what has been inspired by our community. And then lastly, we're also designing how the district's plan is then going to be ingested into the continuous improvement that happens at the school level. Madam Superintendent, that completes my report on the Year 1, Quarter 2 report for our community-inspired strategic plan, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Morse. Madam Chair, that concludes what we have prepared, but remain available for the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank you for that, Mrs. Morse. At this time, does any board member have any questions or comments on this item? Mr. McDaniel?
Happy New Year, Ms. Morris. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
It's good to see you this year. Thank you for everything that you're doing and how you're leading us through the strategic plan. I just have a couple of questions for you up under strategic action number 1, where it says survey of class spaces for orchestra at the middle school level. What's the alternative? Because a lot of our middle schools may be near capacity, at capacity, things of that nature. So is there an alternative in the event that there isn't space found at our middle schools? What's the alternative for having the orchestra programs at our middle schools, or has one begun to be developed?
So I think our goal is to find that space, whether that space needs to be shared with another fine arts program. I was walking a middle school recently and looking at potential spaces that could be utilized for that purpose. We have seen the use at OLA, who's had a program for a while. They've had some creative solutions to where orchestra can go. But I do think definitely this board's priority of having the option of orchestra at every middle school would make it so that we are going to find the space versus seeking to not have the orchestra program.
And then the other question I have goes to, and I wrote it at. I did have one more, and I can't even find it now. Sorry about that. I can't find it. Say again.
If you find it, we can come back to you.
Here it is. I got it. Right
Okay.
when I said thank you. Strategic action number 4. You mentioned the mental health and wellness facilitators, which I know that they have been very busy and very pivotal, instrumental with our current season that we find ourselves in now. With the understanding that they are ESSER funded, and understanding their need here in the county, have we begun to have a conversation about how do we keep those mental health and wellness facilitators beyond the ESSER funded period?
So I can speak to the fact that what we're looking at now is having some conversation with Dr. Madden and Mr. Shrum about looking really smartly at the data on return on investment. So knowing that we've got 3 years of our mental health and wellness facilitators in the building, really saying what is the ideal state? Why do we have these facilitators, and what are we hoping to accomplish by having them in terms of student performance, student outcomes, student perceptions, so that we can then look at that data to say this is doing exactly what we have intended for it to do, so that as we get to the end of those 3 years, and really, quite frankly, the middle of the second year, being able to make a recommendation to the board to say we've got to look at that budget cycle to talk about why we want to, or you all don't want to, keep the mental health and wellness facilitator past the term of those ESSER funds. So I think we owe you to be really smart in looking at the data to talk about impact and looking at return on investment. I feel really strongly about you guys having that in front of you to know whether or not these folks are having an impact, which we see it anecdotally, and I'm excited to be able to potentially then show that in numbers as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Dr. Davis?
I just wanted to add to that response because of a few other factors. One, our Board of Education actually has been unified around a legislative priority for a specific dedicated position to be allocated and funded through the state's funding formula to schools for this very reason. We have not seen this as a recent gap. This has been a growing gap for the types of services that schools can provide young people, staffs, as well as the extension of families under the roof of a schoolhouse. And so I do believe that the data that Missy is speaking to, it really positions our organization to provide those types of proof points of impact for student experience, student health, student wellness, student feelings of safety and belonging, the feeling of being loved and valued, and the feeling of doing well in school, finding school a place one does well, as well as the staff's experience in many of those same categories, because of the national interest in this conversation around the role of schools in young people's lives. So I think this is an important season to not only anecdotally examine the impact, because we are all, you cannot walk through a school without the absolute overwhelming support for the particular impact and role that our mental health and wellness facilitators are playing in each of our school campuses. But simultaneously, we also know it can change students' experiences, and we don't want to leave that to chance. And we get to tell that story on a statewide and national level that actually could inform policymaking beyond the boundaries of our district. And I believe that that is an important pursuit. We happen, under Dr. Madden's leadership, to also be pursued quite widely from across the country to talk about this role as other districts look to it as a model. And so, I mean, it's a great discussion point that the board has brought to our attention, and a great opportunity for us to talk about this not being seen by us as a temporary solution. This is something we've believed is necessary in our school facilities for a long while. So thank you for the opportunity to just elaborate on that answer.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Dr. Nutt?
I have to remember to turn that on. I have a lot of questions, so I'm not quite sure which way to go. So I'm going to start at number 1. Foreign language. I know this board set a priority during one of our work sessions that foreign language was going to be a priority toward for all of our students. Where does that fit in? Would that be for our advanced learning opportunities, like in number 1?
I think it actually, I don't have that right in front of me, but I think it's actually its own initiative and tactic. It lives as a tactic underneath the initiative's calls for world languages. So it would be monitored here in that research design phase under number 1, strategic action 1.
Okay. Have we talked about that? Have we started to implement that?
We have not started to implement yet. It's certainly in that research phase right now of us looking at what best practice is, how answering the questions around how do we want to do that in elementary school. We're already talking about how we want to measure that because that is one of those priority outcomes that we know the formula for. Right. So now it's just a matter of when will we be ready for us to implement that. So it's in that research phase.
Okay. In the robotics, if anyone has not attended a Griffin-Risa robotics competition, it should be coming up pretty soon. I used to judge that, and that's amazing to watch. These children, nothing else might have tuned them in, but the robotics really did interest them. I know that we're going to implement it in 3 through 5. But how will that look in 3 through 5? What will that look like?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So we're starting in 3 through 5 because we know that those are the students who will be our first students entering our STEM high school in 2026. So we started in 3-5. We are working with schools as this is the first implementation of a systematic access to robots for the district. So we're working with each individual school to figure out what the best implementation is for them, because we know everybody's starting at different places. It's one of the reasons why that local ingestion of the strategic plan with principals is so important, because everyone is starting from a slightly different spot if they've had robotics or STEM, et cetera. So we're giving them options to work with them with, to say, if you are trying to transition to have any STEM, maybe we want to start with an after-school club, and we start with the club that might compete at the Griffin-Risa. Or if you are someone who already has a STEM specials in your rotation, let's work to involve these robots now into the 3-5 STEM experience that kids have in their special. Working everybody towards the plan that's going to give the most access to our students in each one of our schools. Now, we're starting with 3-5, but really later on in the calendar year of 2022, we're also going to be doing K2 and 6-8, so that by the end of the calendar year of 2022, we'll have the robots acquired, or we'll recommend they be acquired for K8, so that we're really getting kids ready to be a part of our STEM programming in high school, whether that's at their home high school or at our STEM Academy in 2026.
That's great. That's a great answer, because my concern was, being in elementary school, we had a hard enough time teaching language arts, math, and the basics, and unless it was a special such as art or music or something, I just don't want to put a lot. I don't want the system to invest a lot of money if it's going to be put in a closet somewhere. That's my biggest thing, because being a science teacher, biology is my deal. I love that. But to teach robotics, I'm going to look at you like a deer in headlights, because that is not my forte. This is something that's got to be a passion for something. And these kids have the passion. So I appreciate it. I just hope we can find a way to implement it. I know Pleasant Grove was one of the first STEM schools we have, and Stella Irving is amazing when she gets in her science mode. She's an awesome teacher. You also talked about the advanced effective school leadership and classroom instruction. Are we going to be providing more teacher training for a lot of these initiatives that we're bringing on? Because I know sometimes we hand you a box and say, here, go figure it out. So I hope we're not going to do that to our teachers.
No, for sure. Professional development around all of the implementation, whether it is reading and writing, whether it's the use of the robotics, or even the larger, highly effective classroom work that the plan calls from. We started rolling that out in pieces with our teachers just last Friday as the first phase of introducing them to the instructional framework and to high-yield, effective strategies that lead to student learning. So we're trying to not only provide really great, high-quality, ongoing professional development for teachers, but also rolling it in a way that it's not overwhelming, because you can only introduce a few new things at a time.
Right.
And then once teachers get good at that, we'll start the next round of implementation. So we've been really intentional about recognizing the season that we're in and that teachers are dealing with challenges that are unprecedented, and so we recognize that. This is the way to do it in a regular year. It's certainly the way to do it in a year where teachers are stressed.
I know they appreciate that because I feel like we're just getting used to virtual learning. We're figuring that out as we go, and I appreciate the patience. My last question, I promise. Mine is on number 4, advanced student and employee health, wellness, and support. And support, I have a big question mark there. And this may be something for Dr. Davis. Safety. I am concerned we do not have SROs in all of our schools, and that's no fault of ours. But is this something for later on, or can we talk about that? Because I am very, I guess I'm tired of waiting. What can we do as a board to help bring that to fruition?
I'm happy to jump in here just to, first of all, point to this board's investment in the partnership for a law enforcement official to be in each of our middle and high schools, and actually as recently as October, really asked me to start examining how that expands even further, whether that adjusts our ratio in our high schools, begins including our elementary schools, for many reasons. One, the positive experience and role modeling and mentorship that can occur through that relationship. But really to what you're pointing to is the role in safety and security. So I do believe that the support structures appropriately include safe and secure learning environments. I also think it appropriately includes how we continue to evolve our presence of our SROs in our school facilities and in our extracurricular events or activities. But I don't have the details in front of me and would probably recommend we talk about that in a future session.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nutt. Was that all? Did you have another question?
No, ma'am. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Mrs. Edwards?
Thank you very much. Good evening again, Mrs. Morris, and Happy New Year to you and everyone sitting in the audience. A couple of questions. The first one I want to ask is, who is monitoring the data for the mental facilitators to make sure that what the work that they're doing is effective in our schools? So who's monitoring that data, and how long had the data been, you all have been monitoring the data, if it's being monitored?
So what I would say, and then maybe I'll defer back to you, Dr. Davis, if there's someone with more expertise, is that we are in the design phase right this second of what we need to be collecting in terms of the monitored numerical data. But I would say that principals and, of course, Dr. Madden's team together are working to monitor the work of the mental health and wellness facilitators, to look at where they are having successes, to be able to define that ideal state that we'll then be able to craft the data around. But in terms of the more detailed answer to that question, Dr. Davis, I would defer back to you.
Yeah, no, I think that was really good. I think, again, we're trying to create a proof point of what's possible and what's responsible in serving young people in school, particularly through that position of the mental health and wellness facilitator, and creating an environment where our state and federal legislators realize the necessity for every one of our schools to have a role of that nature, even beyond Henry County. I don't know, Dr. Madden, if you want to elaborate on any of that, but I think that was a pretty succinct response.
I feel comfortable with the response. I do want to share the data that we shared with you last month. We monitor our data monthly internally. We don't have the advancement of what we're discussing today. We would like to advance that work and have those proof points to go along with that data. But yes, we do monitor it monthly based on the critical elements and the assurances that we provided to our families of what type of support they would provide.
Thanks, Dr. Madden.
Oh, I'm going to ask another question. Was there a plan in place? Because I know we hired them quickly. We hired all of them very quickly. Was there a plan in place when those mental health facilitators went into the schools? Because they went in very quickly. So I want to ask that question, and I don't know who's going to answer it.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising the discussion point. And, of course, there was an assessment of a gap in the early recommendation of an additional role in our schools. And that identification of a gap was a couple things. One, we've got to remember that so many of our schools were taking on services for young people that therefore added to the plates of the current professionals, actually causing occasionally counselors to be pulled away from that small group counseling and the academic and career advising. And because it's good work and it needs to be the work that removes barriers for children to successfully access their education. So there was a gap, and we were very clear on what gap this role was defined to fill, and we accomplished that by defining it through the job description. And when defining it through the job description, it then resulted in Dr. Madden's leadership designing a really extraordinary portfolio of training and articulation of responsibilities and ongoing reconvening around that training and checking in on the progress for those responsibilities. So I would say in reflection, that journey was really very methodical. And what we are arriving at is this moment where everyone in the country is calling and asking, how did you structure that position? Because we have that same gap, and we are not solving for it and serving children and their families and our staffs in a way that is sufficient. I think actually just this week we were asked to participate in another national panel talking about how to solve for this very gap that schools are experiencing. And Henry's now being seen as an organization who really dedicated the time and preparation to do that. But what we also need to do now is say, okay, well, what points of impact are actually identifiable? And so that's the data that Dr. Madden was looking at, whether it's number of opportunities for families to receive direct service references, or whether it's actual student performance data, or it's related to your sense of belonging, your sense of safety in your school. So Dr. Madden has a cadence in which she and her team review that kind of information as we continue to shape the role that plays. So I'm sure that's a little more than what you actually asked for. But Dr. Madden, if you want to talk a little bit about that, going from gap identification to preparation for this roles to be implemented in the school.
Absolutely. We did have a gap identification, and it was mainly, we wanted our teachers to be able to teach for the most part and be able to focus on the students and learning. So in filling that gap, we looked at those wellness needs of our students and looked at those needs, and we provided our trainings. We had robust training with our people before they even started, and the training had continued from trauma-informed care to mental health and first aid for our students. So all those trainings then led to focus plans for each school. Each of those mental health and wellness facilitators personalized those plans, as well as had things that we must, elements of the plan that we must have met. So in addition to that and the personalization of those needs, as well as ongoing needs daily with those direct services, that's how the plan evolved. There's additional training that's continuous. We have training coming up this month as well. So they are continuously refined and revised and adjusted as needed to make sure that they're ready to support our students and families continuously.
Okay, my next question is, since there's been training already and there's additional training coming up, who's actually facilitating the training?
I don't have the facilitators in front of me, but I'm happy to provide that for the board if that's of interest.
Well, I just thought I would ask, because if they've been trained and training is still going on, then somebody should know who's actually facilitating the training.
Yes, definitely. I'm positive that we know who is facilitating the training. I just don't have that off the top of my head, so we will definitely provide that to the board.
Okay, then please get that to me. Please get that to me. Another question is there, and talking about the robotics, because, we talked earlier, and I just want to ask this question in the meeting, is there a replacement agreement with VEX, with that company, in case parts are missing, parts get lost? Is there an placement agreement?
Sure. So the business item that we're going to bring later in the meeting, this point in the RFP, we are making a recommendation for who we would want to buy these robots from. Once you guys choose to accept that recommendation or not, if you do, that puts us at the negotiating table. And so then that allows us to sit down with the company to negotiate to be sure that we get extra parts that are included or replacement parts as part of our deal. So we haven't gotten to the negotiation phase yet of the process. We will get to that once you guys decide whether or not the recommendation to acquire them is what you'd like to do.
Okay, but let me ask this question. So, do you not think that should have been a part of the discussion?
Well, what we know is in them already is that we have for every 2 or 3 kits, there's another box that's full of replacement parts. So we know in terms of, kids are going to lose a Lego here and there, or the equivalent of a Lego in VEX. We know we've got those parts. Now, some of the more expensive pieces, the motors and that goes along with that has to become a part of the negotiation. But the RFP process really puts us in a state of not being able to ask some of those questions until after we know who the person is that we're recommending.
Okay, my last question is, will there be additional teachers needed for when these robotic kits enter into our buildings, or being placed into the buildings? Right now, I think teachers are all committed. Everyone's committed right now in those buildings. So would there be additional staff needed?
One of the things I love about this robotics kit and about our STEM team here in Henry is that they have mapped these STEM units that go along with this equipment to all of the existing standards that our 3-5 teachers teach. So whether that's computer science standards, math standards, science standards, even some ELA, wherever there is an ability for us to utilize the robots to teach those standards that we're already teaching, we have mapped that for teachers. So the reality is that this can be used in a lot of different ways, whether that's, as I mentioned before, an after-school program to get us started. One of the other ways to do it is for teachers to use it within the course of their normal instructional time. So it is not something that is going to require a teacher at every building to be able to man, if you will, the robotics kits. Training is going to be critical, and we've got a lot of really excited early adopters. In the business item, you'll see we had 61 teachers who came and participated in looking at what they wanted, were excited about that, so that they can become our early adopters. We've got video of them using them in classrooms so that we can then be able to spread that out. So professional development is a big part of this, and our STEM team has already started working on what that plan needs to look like to get teachers, early adopters, starting even as early as this spring, but getting everybody ready to have that hands-on experience for the students to learn their standards that we've talked about being so critical.
And this, regarding the robotics, is a 2-year contract?
Well, once we've bought the robots, they're ours. So it's a one-time purchase, and then once we, like so many of those capital equipment purchases, once they wear out, we'll have to come back and buy again. But it's not a subscription in the same way some of the other stuff is.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Mrs. Pope?
Yes, thank you so much, Mrs. Morris. I just want to say regarding the quarterly report. In all of my conversations with both school councils and community groups that I've had the privilege of speaking with about our strategic plan, this has come up, that people are grateful that we listen to their voice to create the plan, and then we are bringing it back to them regularly. So thank you so much, and thank you to the data team for making it so easy to read and follow. I think that it just says a lot about our commitment to being sure that each one of our students does have the opportunities and access and outcomes that we've committed to here. And then, I know we are discussing the robotics later, but since it's already been, we've already had a lot of discussion, I am just really excited to see this implemented. I know that it may look a little different in each one of our buildings, but it is my hope that every one of our students will have the opportunity to use this new equipment. I think that there's a wonderful place for clubs. I hope we have a club at every one of our schools, but I hope that this is something that all of our students have great access to regularly. I think that this can pave way for some really talented engineers as they leave our buildings, in 8 or 9 years. So I think that this is really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it in the business items. But I do hope that all of the students have equal access to that. And then, again, I just look forward to the next quarterly report and all of those numbers growing as they go down the list, so that we can do all of these great things on behalf of the kids. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Pope. And I would have to agree with what Mrs. Pope just said. It really has been exciting to be a part of the conversations as we're kind of relaunching, so to speak, our strategic plan out in the community. And I agree, there has been a lot of excitement, lots of people coming up to us after we've presented, asking great questions, and just so excited about the opportunities that our students and staff are going to have because of this plan. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you and everyone who's been involved in this. It really, I feel like we've been talking about this for 5 years already, although it really hasn't been. But it's so exciting to me personally just to now see this really coming to fruition. So just really exciting. So thank you so much for that.